Welcome back, Scott.
Morning.
Let's le- dig deeper into all the things that would be useful to do to kind of try to improve your physique, improve your health as well alongside of it all. Because we both know you can improve physique and completely mess up your health. That's a topic for a different day. Today, I wanted to talk about and dig into your brain about metrics to track to improve female physique specifically. What are the key metrics you would suggest to track? What do you track? We know there are a lot of opinions out there like, hey, don't get obsessive about this and it's gonna develop that and this and that. To me, when I look on anyone's physique, I approach it as I would approach if it was a business to run. The more you know about it, the harder it is to mess it up. If you're just winging it, not going to get very far. And that comes as well with understanding at what stage of your life you are, in the sense of like mentally where you are and what's more important for you at certain stage of your life. But to me, if you, let's say, compare it to a road to go, if you're not acknowledging where you're going, and more importantly, where is your starting point, the chances of you getting there are extremely slim, almost not impossible to kind of acknowledge. So, what are the key metrics? Do you divide them in specific areas? Let's say nutrition, physiology, psychology, those kind of things. And what do you think is the most important thing to learn to track to begin with?
That's a good question. I have my female clients tracking a lot of different things. It's not really a blanket for all of them. I kind of specify it to the client once I get to know the goal and see the response to my assessment forms and stuff like that. Um, Obviously, the most important one, I can't even say that, but obviously some of the more important ones are going to be goal dependent. Um, if somebody comes to me and their goal is fat loss, then a metric that's actually measuring fat loss would become a very, very important thing to consider. FYI, scale weight does not necessarily equate to fat loss. So it would kind of depend on what we're looking to achieve. The other thing is, I agree with you with your analogy of like the more you know about a business, the less like you can screw it up. I think that's very true when it comes to physiology, because there is a lot of lifestyle factors that can influence a lot of the metrics that are most commonly being measured. And therefore, females are getting false positives or false negatives, whatever you want to think, because the lifestyle factors or environmental factors or whatever are influencing the things that they're deeming to be the measure of progress. And oftentimes, they're just choosing the wrong metric to measure the progress they're looking for. So they get stuck in this vicious cycle of they think they're doing something wrong or not well enough because they're not getting results, but all the while the results they're measuring aren't really what they're looking for.
So to me, it sounds like okay. Let's get into fat loss first. And to me, fat loss will be lean muscle accrual and getting rid of body fats that is not wanted, but to the point where you are still healthy. So, what specific things do you track there? Is it body composition with calipers? Is it body composition with one of those body index things? Let's go with something simple that people can use at home, if you can even go with that. And more importantly, to me specifically, is how would you assess their muscular development? Do you take tape measures? Do you take photos? What do you think is useful for somebody to to do it without spending loads of money and traveling to local university to do their DEXA scan and whatnot?
Yep.
And more importantly,
Um,
how often would you do that?
okay. So I'm assuming the majority of people watching these are going to be aesthetically driven females looking to change their body composition, therefore the way they look. So performance aspects aside, I pulled up one of my clients' spreadsheets here just so I can reference some of these things. The first thing that I would check if we're looking to lose body fat and or gain lean contractile tissue, I want a body composition measurement. Therefore, that is not the scale, not directly. I do use the body weight scale, but it's an indirect measurement to help validate other things. So I want something that I consider to be accurate in terms of body composition measurement. And what I think is accurate is something that they can do consistently. I will learn what the result of their measurement is, and I'll know how to make adjustments if they consistently check it. So what I mean is the in-body scale that people use. I literally just had a consultation with with a client, not even a client, it was actually a consultation for a potential client 2 days ago. And one of the questions that came up was the in-body. They have access to one. It's at the gym that they own, and they want to be using it. I've put females on stage that I've never met in person using the in-body as our tracker. It can be done, but you have to understand what it's doing. It's a bioimpedance current, electrical current running through, and the time it takes to travel from the two contact points, your feet or your hands, whatever you're holding, is determined by how much body fat is in the body, how much muscle is in the body, how much water is in the body, because it's essentially measuring resistance, because the travel time will determine that based on the amount of resistance it's seen. So you could step on an in-body scale or hold the bioimpedance measurement tool, and it says, 19%. You could go pee, come back and take another reading, and it'll be completely different because you put some body water, you excreted some body water, therefore changed the total body water, therefore changed the current time that bioimpedance scale will be measuring, and therefore it would affect your quote unquote body fat percentage, even though your body fat percentage via body fat hasn't changed. What's changed is your overall total body mass changed, and what left was water, which is considered fat-free mass, not fat mass. So your body fat percentage could have gone up. You didn't gain body fat, but what you did is you lost fat-free mass. But if we check the in-body scale regularly, under the same conditions, so you checked it after you just woke up and went to the bathroom naked, or at 12 o'clock when you know that you ate last at 11 and by that time you had 3 liters of fluids, whatever the lifestyle allows for consistency and a sustainable approach, we just use that. And when we monitor those variables, because those variables affect that measurement. So it can be done, but it just requires a lot more micromanaging of outside variables. I prefer skin fold calipers. They don't even have to be the $500 pair. I have a pair, but I use these all the time. They're like $25 on Amazon. They're good because they're spring loaded, so you can't bias the pressure. You just pull the trigger and let it settle, and the springs dictate the pressure. So it's not you squeezing, because you can bias that. Obviously, you have to know how to use them, and really the only magic to them is making sure you go to the same location on the body and grab the same amount of skin. So it's just a practicing thing.
But when you do your skin fold calipers before you kind of move forward, do you teach them how to do that? Do you send them kind of like a manual or whatever? Hey, this is how I want you to do that.
I teach them how to do it, and how depends. Usually, especially lately, we've actually been doing them on a video call together. They feel I try not to give my clients just documents and documents to make them read. I try to have it as much of a virtual experience as we can, because it's actually better for me, because people give me insights and clues just when I see them, how they move in their body language and what they're saying. Just passing back data. I mean, I need the data, but I also need some sort of realism to the conversation. So we usually do them on a video call, and we'll determine based on what we're trying to achieve, based on their physiology, their anatomy, etc., what are the best locations. I don't buy into you have to go to these special sites, because those special sites were created for an equation, which was done under laboratory settings. I don't use the equations. I don't think they're very relevant in the real world, because we don't have laboratory settings. So you can't control all the things that they did when they created the equation. So you're getting a false positive. It could say that your I've had females tell me that, oh, they did the Jackson Pollock 7 site and they're 7% body fat. I'm like, well, you're not. Like that's just not right. So I would much rather just get the total millimeters and make adjustments to the training and the nutrition, etc., based on the movement of the total millimeters. I don't care about the equation because I don't care what the body fat percentage really is. I care what they look like, how they feel, how they perform, etc. So the in-body scan needs to be done under the same conditions all the time. The calipers aren't as fussy when it comes to that, but I still think it's a good idea to do them under this at the same time of day. They don't need to be done daily, but just a consistent routine is always better when you're trying to measure patterns. Once a week or even every 2 weeks is good enough for skin fold calipers. My clients, we do it once a week. Um, Sometimes you don't see movement, but the weekly accountability just keeps compliance in check. And it's very, very rare. There's not a millimeter or two movement every week until you're getting down to the very, very lean individuals. So if we do a regular weekly check or whatever, and there's a little bit of progress, it usually keeps momentum going. Their attitude is positive, and they keep striving for more.
What points would you check? Because I'm guessing for women, checking body fats millimeters on thighs will be quite problematic for most of the people. Whereas like for guys, it might be stomach and things like that. So what would you check specifically for women? Because I've done the qualification to be like ISEC technician, how they call it. So we had to
Yep.
measure bone girth and all that kind of stuff. All makes a difference. But what would you suggest for somebody at home who can buy these calipers probably from Amazon just to go through and say like, hey, these 3, 4, 5, 8 points, how many would you go for?
That's a good question, and that actually varies on everyone quite a bit, and it usually varies because of their um, environment. So if I have a client who has a partner or access to somebody that can do the calipers for them, they usually get somebody to do them for them. That way, they can access sites that they otherwise wouldn't be able to reach. Realistically, many of my clients don't have that, and so they check themselves. So because of that, we're kind of limited. You can't reach your subscapular and do a measurement on your back because it's just not feasible. So what I typically do is there's a few sites that are very telltale for sure for men and women. But specifically for women, if you do anything in the abdomen area, so like the umbilical, which is a few inches lateral to the navel, the suprailiac, which is basically your hip bone area. Women, when fat loss is happening, which is really easy to get that happening, those sites move relatively quickly and they're easy to check because they're right in front of you. You just look down and you use your belly button as a landmark, or you literally palpate your hip bone. You can find those locations very easily, repeatedly. And because they move, it's a good spot to start because you'll start seeing progress right away. I'm not trying to trick them. It's just that it's important to show that there is progress happening to keep mindsets in the right place and to keep momentum going because every coach that I've ever heard of says, quote unquote, trust the process. But 9 out of the 10 coaches I've met are fucking morons. So it's very hard to trust the process when you've been told that by everyone and it's never worked. So I like to use the abdomen areas. And if they're doing their own calipers, I have them do right and left side. There's nothing wrong with doing both. If I do navel right, navel left, I have 2 points of data instead of just one. Same with the hips. So if I just do right and left both sides, I have now 4 data points. Because I don't care about the equation, I don't care where I grab body fat. I just want to grab the same location every time and get as much measuring as I can. Um, the thigh is a good location because women hold body fat there, but it's oftentimes very problematic to grab because it's very dense. So I have them reach inside the thigh, like go to an area where it's not so dense, just so you can get a little bit more of an accurate, consistent check. But then from there, I sometimes females have personal troubled areas that they don't like. Like I have one female that measures the inside of her knee because she's got a fat depot there that bugs her. It's super normal. Like we all have it to a degree, but hers, she's those zones in on it. So it's a super easy location for her to get. So we check it. We do right and left side, inside knee. Um, there's nothing really specific, male, female, that I'm married to, though obviously with fat distribution patterns, it does differ. But what sometimes you have to be careful of with women is body fat can be mobilized and not oxidized. And therefore, it can be somewhere in the body and then it can be restored. It's like a reesterification of body fat. So you could essentially be getting leaner up top, but fatter below. So we can't only use upper body measurements on females because of that reason. It can happen, but I have other metrics that I have them checking that also helps make sure that that's not going anywhere. At some point, with all the cross referencing of different metrics, you're going to catch something that's going astray. You just have to be paying attention and understanding what you're measuring and why you measure it, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Just touching up a little bit on body impedance. I remember I had I believe like 10, 12 years ago now. One of the first ones that came out, you had to lie down on your back. You had to take your socks off, and there was like a procedure how you had to position a person just to measure
Yeah.
that stuff. So now they just like, hey, grab on this, and we're gonna tell you what it is. And more often than not, it's just extremely imprecise. Uh, but going from this, there's only so much body fat you'll ever want to lose or can lose. What's next? What do you track? I have people I'm still working with for decades, and there isn't much body fat to shift, but there is definitely a progress to be made. So how do you track, let's say, strength, performance, and muscle increase through time? What metrics do you use? What would you suggest?
So when I'm looking at my client spreadsheets, um, girth measurements is another thing that we could talk about, but I typically avoid those for most females. But when it comes to measuring the performance aspect of stuff, it would depend on what the performance goals are. When it's a fat loss phase, which to be fair, not to put down anyone's efforts, but to lose body fat, it is the easiest. Like to train bodybuilding is the easiest goals. It's
So many
really just
people argue with me about this. Like, no,
I
it's
don't know
so
how
hard. I'm like, no, it's literally the easiest thing to do.
it is. It is
Gaining the
absolutely the
muscle
easiest one.
is the most annoying, the time-consuming things that takes so much effort. And until
Yeah,
you actually tried it at high level, you'll never appreciate how easy it is to lose body fat.
it's absolutely true. And the magic to training like a bodybuilder is the answer is that no one wants to hear it is that you just have to be consistent. If you just consistently do the basics, it'll get you where you're trying to go, but it's not sexy and it's not fast because that's the answer. It's not supposed to be, but it is the simplest, most fundamental way of training is that. But when it comes to measuring, so performance aside, I want to know if we're getting muscle. I look at the training. The training is going to tell me, are we getting stronger or are we not? I mean, at the end of the day, yes, I understand that newbie gains are oftentimes just neurological in the beginning and all these things. All this stuff is somewhat true. But at the end of the day, if they're progressively increasing something in the gym, the load, the sets, the reps, if they're doing progressive overload, they're going to be getting bigger muscles. How big? That depends. Can I measure it in my studio here? That depends. Sometimes the growth is quite tiny and you almost need like biopsies. But at the end of the day, if you look at all of the metrics, if I have somebody that's calipering and the body fat is not going down anymore according to a caliper, well, we have to remember we're only calipering certain sites. Maybe it's 5 places, maybe it's 10, maybe it's 30, but they're always the same location. You have body fat everywhere. You have body fat on the pads of your feet. You have body fat in areas that you would never think to caliper. So just because a location is not moving doesn't mean we're not losing body fat. And then we look at scale weight. I have females track scale weight every day. It's to me it's a non-negotiable in the sense that it's a daily track. Either you don't check it or you check it every day. I don't care about a Wednesday weight or a Friday morning weight. I don't care. If you want to tell me, fine, but I'm not using it of any relevance at all because it's a complete one-off variable. So we check daily body weight. And if we have a daily body weight, then I have a weekly average. So if I have somebody's calipers that haven't budged and body fat, body weight hasn't budged, but they're noticeably stronger via the training programs. Like I'm lifting, I was lifting 100 pounds, now I'm lifting 125 or 150 for the same rep, same duration, blah, blah. Then what gave here? If I'm the same caliper, same weight, something had to have given. I'm stronger. I therefore have to have more muscle. It's by process of elimination. The same thing could be said, like, and I've had this happen. I had a female years ago, probably over a decade ago. She had just competed, won the overall, and was doing a show 5 weeks later. And we needed to get leaner for the following show, but she was gaining body fat as we were getting closer. And it took me a few weeks to figure out what was going on. And what had ended up happening is because her calipers just weren't budging, just like we're talking about, but her scale weight wasn't really budging either. And she wasn't looking leaner. So I'm like, something's wrong here. Bring in your training journal. This was before I did everything on computer. It was literally like pen and paper, right? Let's look at your training log. And she was reducing her intensity in the gym. She was taking the load off the bar. So from 150 pounds, she's going down to 125, then 100. She was losing lean contractile tissue. And it was to the point where we couldn't measure the data yet, but we could visibly see it. And now we had the training journal to document that that's what was going on. She let the stimulus go. So over time, her basal metabolic rate was slowing down because we were losing lean tissue slowly. But that's what drives this is your basal metabolic rate. So after 5 weeks, we pulled out of the show because it was all for nothing. We caught it about 3 weeks out, but it was too late. And
Was
that's
it
what happened. It
because
took
she
about
was
5 to 6 weeks.
fatigued, or was it because she bought into this, hey, the leaner you are, the lighter loads you need to use now?
It was both. But the thing is that she's still my client now. She's been my client now for over a decade. But the thing is that the fatigue thing was real, of course, but then the whole mindset was also a big factor, which you learn your clients as you go, right? She can't get away with that stuff. And she hasn't been able to get away with that stuff for years with me now. But at the time, at first like I couldn't figure it out. But then because I'm tracking so many things, and I track even more now because over the years you constantly learn other things that are helpful. There's just no sneaking it past anymore. Something catches it via cross-referencing the data. I have you check skinfold calibers, I have you check body weight, I have you check training. And those are all just the actual things we can measure. But then I have a checklist that I have people do, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. On this particular client, there's 23 things she tracks. And they're just very simple on a scale of 1 to 10. I just want to know what you think. 10 is very good, 1 is very bad. She has 23. Some people have more, some people have less. It just depends on the client. And I'm just looking at their mindset essentially. Like, how's your mood? How's your mental clarity? How's your energy, your sleep, stress, muscle soreness, joint pain, joint mobility, digestion? How was the training sessions? How's your hydration, your hunger, your libido, your blood pressure, your resting heart rate, your step count, your body weight? Where are we in your period? All those things are on this particular one I'm looking at. And they scale on 1 to 10. And this is the most important tab I have, because this one is kind of foretelling the future. It's not telling me what the problem is right now. It's telling me either where we're coming from or where we're headed. And when I look at this, because they're supposed to, and they do for the most part, It's just your opinion. But your opinion is obviously biased, but your emotions and your environment that day and whatever you're going through, that biases your opinion. So it's still going to give me trends. So if I see that, you know, sleep quality is getting worse and resting heart rate is going up, I know we have a problem, even though it might not be showing up in the data yet. So then we can look at, okay, what's the timeline like? Where are we? What do we do? How do we address this? And it's all these little almost micromanaging sort of things that I think make the biggest difference, which is why I agree with your analogy in the beginning. The more I know about them, the better I can do my job, because a lot of this stuff, the devil's in the details. Like, it takes quite a while for concrete data like a caliper or a body weight or a training program to show you if you're stalling or not, because there's always this physiological lag time with the body. But these things kind of foresee what's to come, and it helps put it all together.
This brings me to the next thing is, do you ever check like flexibility, mobility, the movement quality? Because what I find sometimes, it's usually with people who are just starting out working with me, is that if I ask them to work more intense, they will inevitably sacrifice form. And they do it with a purpose because they think that all I'm bothered about is intensity. Whereas I'm bothered about you being healthy for as long as you can, which you can't sustain if you only chase weights. You kind of, but at the same time, if you never do that stupid swinging around and cheating, so to speak, when you train, you never experience what you could actually do. So my approach would be like a wave like. Let's load up, let's mess your technique completely, but at least you feel that load, how it's gonna feel like, and then scale you back a little bit, take that little load off, and polish the technique and go forward from that. Do you track anything like that, and would you suggest anyone to track something that majority of people now do, which is recording themselves training?
Yes to both those questions. Joint mobility is actually one of the metrics in this girls program. When it comes to that, it's going to be goal dependent. Um, if I have a power lifter, for example, mobility is the antagonist of stability, and we need stability to bring out the most amount of power. So I don't chase additional mobility. I don't chase hypermobility or whatever people want to call it when I need a stable platform to do a performance. So if I have a jujitsu fighter, I need more mobility than if I have a NFL lineman. So it kind of depends on the goal, but what I use as the sort of measurement is, do you have enough mobility to accomplish the task that we need to do for you to accomplish the goal? And in other words, if you need to squat ass to grass, are you anatomically able to? If you are not, the goal is off the table, because I'm not going to force you into an anatomical position that you cannot do,
And
because it's going to damage you.
before you even go further on that topic, I've been told off for being so mobile.
You've been told what?
Told off for being as mobile as I am. I'm like, no, you're not training muscle anymore. You're just so like, I have been told to stop before I reach my range of motion, like end of my range of motion, because my muscles switch out. Like I can go in such a deep squat that very few can do, and I lose tension on my quads or everything else. And then I start risking my lower back issues and all those kind of things. So how do you track it? That's my question. What do you ask them to assess? Do you ask them to assess a photo, a video? Do you ask them to, hey, can you flex your ankle at so many degrees? What is there to track?
All of my clients, we talked about this before, they fill out a fairly thorough form. So once I've got the responses and I've created the program and I've delivered the program, they have to film themselves doing every exercise I put on the protocol, and they have to send me the video, and I watch them, and I'm fucking nitpicky, and I admit it, and I tell them. And I had one female literally have to redo a technical, in my opinion, technical error on a exercise technique 3 times, and it was things that most people aren't seeing, but it's because of the training I've had and the experiences I've had. I'm not trying to be a dick. I'm trying to make sure that I'm not increasing any risk.
Mm.
I also then make it aware to them if there is risk. I'm not the boss. They're the quarterback. I'm just delivering the information and letting them make this decision, but I want to inform them as much as I can so they have the ability to make an informative decision. So, I mean, I have had people that want to powerlift and they don't have the anatomical ability to get down into that lifter's wedge to, I don't want to say safely or properly do a deadlift, but to be at the most resilient position to do a deadlift. They just can't do it and they don't care. It's the risk is worth the reward to them, so they do it. But some people just can't do it. You have some people have very deep hip sockets. If you have a very deep hip socket, the odds of you doing acid grass squatting without adding additional unnecessary stress to your back is not existent. You will add additional unnecessary stress. That doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. That's up to you. But other people don't. I have done hip scours on people in here doing back assessments. Some people I can take their leg. So you're lying down on a bed and I'm cradling your shin, your calf, and your femur, and I'm scouring your hip, tracing your hip socket basically with your knees. I've been able to put a person's knee into their armpit and their hips don't budge. They have such a shallow hip socket. It's like a golf ball on a tee. I can put their knee right into their armpit. It's not a coincidence that they also come from an ethnic background where they were squatting over holes for bathrooms growing up as kids. Like it's an evolutionary thing.
Mm.
I've had other people where I can't even get their knee much past 90 degrees until their entire pelvis starts to roll up with it. Those people become NFL linemen. The golf ball on a tee becomes like a fucking ballerina or a gymnast. Like there's certain anatomical variances that you just can't change. So as long as you know the limits, you work within it. And if somebody wants to push the end range, that's up to them. You can push end range. I would never be of the person to say you cannot do that, but you have to be aware of what you're doing and you need to make sure that you are in control. If you just let momentum swing you to end range, then you get things like Tiger Woods, who got so much more power from after a few very clever supplementation protocols, where his rotational power got to the point where he was over rotating, where his anatomical basically anatomy couldn't stop it, and he was damaging the spine. It wasn't because he was doing something wrong; it's because he just got so much more power. He hadn't adapted to that yet.
Mm.
So you can coax the body along and bring things for the ride if you do so in a manner that allows adaptations to occur. But there are certain structural variances that you don't get to compromise on, and some of those are hip socket depth, because we have two sets of ball and sockets on our bodies, our shoulders and our hips. Everything else, there is no other ball and socket joints. And the depth and the basically the way that is constructed in you, that determines everything. So you have to learn how to work within that. So my clients have to show me videos before I'll agree to. It's not that I can't sign off on. I mean, it's still up to them. But if they want to get the best out of me, they have to give me the information I require,
So
because I've had it in the past.
I'm assuming what you do is this is you assess it once and maybe after a year or so if needed to make sure that you pick them the right exercise.
It's definitely not after a year. I assessed them in the beginning to make sure that they're doing the exercise technique the way that I want it done. And then from there, I assess it whenever there's a need. And that need usually pops up when I'm looking at their checklists. Like if I'm seeing things that don't make sense to me, because you made a point that I find as well, people just keep trying to increase intensity, because I'm a big proponent of trying to get you to increase intensity. And by intense, I mean load on the bar. Um, they try, but they're losing technical aspects of the exercise and they're not realizing it. And that becomes a problem. So when you start seeing like linear increases in load constantly, I start to raise an eyebrow, because it's never going to be linear like this. but it usually there's other ways to cross-reference it with the metrics I track, like muscle soreness or joint pain or joint mobility. Those markers start to get skewed a little bit, and it'll all make sense. If people are following the way I laid out for them, it will always, so far, you know, it'll always show me what's going on. Sometimes you have to look a little deeper because sometimes it's hidden, but with the cross referenceability of different metrics, you can figure out the answer.
And I think this is valuable to add. I think this is something that would be probably more frequently tracked with guys who are larger when they go on their bulk, so to speak, and diet. For example, I know if I gain or lose 5 kilos, my biomechanics change completely. Like the way I move, even the simplest exercise becomes like an adventure. Like when I get over 120 kilos, I hate to train. It's just the way it feels, how my joints move is completely different. Even like 5 kilo dumbbell curl becomes just a painful experience. It's not fun anymore.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with you, and that comes down to a host of factors. Like, and one of the bigger ones is like how quickly did that body shift take place? And usually with guys, again, I don't want to stereotype them all, but when you look at that bodybuilding sort of demographic, they're not, you know, they're not the wizards of the world, and so usually it's like, yo, bro, I'm bulking, bulking, bulking. Yo, bro, I'm cutting, cutting, cutting. It's always extremes, extreme up and down, up, down, up, down, and it's always drug induced, drug fueled. And they're missing all kinds of important information there. And you can make pretty wicked swings in body weight. And that's not necessarily a big swing in body composition in actual morphological tissue. It's just a difference of fat free mass via mostly fluid. Like, I mean, like I skew fighters' body weights 10% in a few days. 10% on, 200-pound guy, you're talking about 20 pounds. Like, I'm going to be moving a guy's weight for this Saturday, 10 pounds, and I'm going to do it overnight. Like, it's not a big deal to move weight. And if you move an excessive amount of weight, it can factor into how you move for sure, especially if it's so acutely. And then obviously male fat distribution pattern versus female is slightly different. But when it's water weight, it's just going to affect everything. So most people, when they're driving for the goal of aesthetics, my goal is to get them sustainable habits so we can achieve the goal and maintain the goal. Like it's a sustainable, attainable goal. And so usually you're just going nice and slow and steady, and you don't have to worry as much about massive weight fluctuations, therefore impacting biomechanics.
Yeah, and the main reason I'm bringing this up is because we see a lot of people like training as couples and just understanding the difference that if you're a girl training with a guy and he's cutting or bulking or whatever, the same movements that he did 3 months ago with you now might be very, very difficult for him to execute, or vice versa. Uh,
Yeah.
so it's an interesting thing. Like for me, I just do a lot of warm-up routines to check if I can still move the way I like to move. So it's not as much an assessment that I would do on purpose. It's more about, can I still scratch my back? If I can't, what the hell?
Right, right, right. And that's a good approach, is to just, if you have the range of motion you need, make sure you don't lose the range of motion. And you don't lose the range of motion by continually using the range of motion. But a lot of people make the mistake of, I need more mobility. So they literally chase for additional flexibility or mobility. And that's usually a recipe for disaster.
And this brings me to, I don't know if you can kind of quickly wrap up, if you have any kind of recovery indicators that you track, ability to train intensely, hard, and frequent enough.
Yeah, the resting heart rate is a good metric for recovery indications. As slow as so is sleep quality and stress levels. Um, there's quite a few things: libido, mood, mental clarity. All those things factor in, but the quickest ones I'd be looking at is things like sleep quantity and quality of hours, and then also the resting heart rate. Resting heart rate is going to start to skew relatively quickly if recovery is a problem.
Awesome, Scott. I appreciate your time. I know you need to be shooting off, and I'll see you next video.
Yeah, man. Thanks. Sounds good.